Forget quirky neighborhood quirks. These are HOA rules so bizarre and so restrictive they will make you question who truly owns your home. From banning specific plants to dictating what kind of curtains you can hang, prepare to be shocked. You will not believe the lengths some HOAs go to. For countless homeowners, this is a daily reality. Homeowners associations claim to protect property values and create harmony, but behind the polished image hides an overwhelming level of control. This is the story of how one family learned that lesson the hard way. David and Sarah Miller had dreamed of owning a home for years. After spending too long in cramped apartments with noisy neighbors and constant rent hikes, they wanted peace and stability. David worked remotely as a software engineer and longed for a quiet office. Sarah, a schoolteacher, imagined a small garden where she could grow lavender and wildflowers. When they discovered Willow Creek Estates, it looked like perfection. The streets were clean, the lawns manicured, and children played safely in the cul-de-sac. The real estate agent promised them peace of mind. An HOA, she explained, would keep everything beautiful and organized. She assured them that the rules were simple and hardly noticeable. They signed the contract, their excitement outweighing any concerns about the thick binder of HOA covenants. In the beginning, life felt like a dream. Sarah planted roses in the front yard, David arranged his new office with a view of the street, and the neighbors even welcomed them with cookies. The HOA sent them a welcome package, and for a moment everything seemed perfect. That illusion ended with the first letter. It arrived neatly folded in their mailbox and informed them that their trash bin had been left at the curb past the approved collection hours. According to HOA regulations, bins had to be removed from view by 8 o'clock in the evening. They had brought it in at 9:30. It felt petty, but they ignored it. Until the second letter came. This time, the HOA claimed their lawn was not in compliance. The grass, they wrote, exceeded the 3-inch maximum height. David had just mowed the lawn days before, but the letter made one thing clear: someone was watching. Soon after, he noticed a man in khakis walking through the neighborhood with a clipboard, stopping at each house to take notes. The unease grew stronger. Sarah mentioned the letters to a neighbor, who lowered her voice and warned her that the HOA board was strict. They watched everything: decorations, flowers, even the type of blinds in the windows. The advice was simple: do not get on their bad side. Sarah tried to dismiss it, but worry crept in. She looked at her roses and lavender differently, wondering if even her garden could be considered a violation. That fear became reality when she hung a simple silver wind chime on the porch. Just 3 days later, another letter arrived. Wind chimes, the HOA stated, were not permitted under Covenant 12D. They were to be removed within 48 hours or the homeowners would face penalties. The dream home was starting to feel more like a cage. The perfect lawns, the identical houses, the sterile streets all seemed suffocating now. The realtor had promised they would hardly notice the rules. But now, it felt like they noticed nothing else. And this was only the beginning. The first warnings were enough to unsettle David and Sarah, but what came next pushed them into a world they could hardly believe existed. The rules began to pile up, each one stranger than the last, exposing the true absurdity of life under a homeowners association. It began with color. The Millers had dreamed of painting their front door a cheerful shade of blue to make their house feel welcoming. Sarah even picked out a paint swatch and taped it to the door to test it. Days later, before they could even buy the paint, a letter arrived. According to Willow Creek's covenant, only 3 door colors were approved: forest green, deep burgundy, or beige. Any deviation from those choices required a lengthy approval process. Their dream of a bright blue door was immediately shut down. Next came the trash cans. It was not just the timing that mattered. The HOA required bins to be stored out of sight entirely, meaning inside the garage or behind fencing. If even the top edge of a bin could be seen from the street, it was considered a violation. David found himself dragging the trash can behind bushes at odd angles just to avoid another warning. Then came the garden. Sarah's joy in tending her lavender and roses quickly turned to dread. One morning she found another letter, this time stating that her choice of flowers did not comply with community guidelines. Willow Creek allowed only approved plantings, which meant select species of shrubs and 2 varieties of flowers. Lavender and wild roses were not on the list. If she didn't remove them, the HOA would fine her $25 per day until the violation was corrected. The strangest rule appeared around the holidays. As December approached, Sarah bought a small wreath to hang on the front door. It was simple and classic, just green branches with a red bow. Within 48 hours, the HOA issued a notice. Holiday decorations were allowed only during the window of December 10th through January 5th. Anything outside of those dates violated the covenant. Their wreath, displayed a week too early, was deemed unacceptable. The absurdity didn't stop there. Neighbors whispered stories of people fined for hanging the wrong curtains, for having garden gnomes on their lawns, or for leaving basketball hoops visible from the street. David and Sarah began to realize that nothing about their home truly belonged to them. It was all dictated by a board of neighbors who wielded more power than they had ever imagined, and soon, the cost of non-compliance would no longer be just frustration. It would become financial. The absurd rules quickly escalated into restrictions that seemed almost unbelievable. At first, David thought the stories from neighbors had to be exaggerations. But each month brought new evidence that the HOA's control extended far beyond what anyone would reasonably expect. One of the most shocking discoveries came when Sarah learned about the pet policy. Hidden deep in the covenant was a clause that set weight limits on dogs. Any dog over 35 pounds was prohibited within the community. David's brother often visited with his golden retriever, and suddenly Sarah realized that even a family visit could technically put them in violation. She asked around and learned that one family had actually been forced to give up their Labrador after repeated fines from the HOA. The restrictions on personal expression were equally oppressive. Political signs were not permitted under any circumstances, no matter how small. Holiday decorations were limited not just by date but by type. Strings of lights had to be white only. Colored bulbs were banned. Inflatable decorations were completely prohibited. Even American flags could only be displayed on certain approved days. David's frustration grew when he learned that some restrictions even applied to the inside of the home. Window coverings visible from the street had to be white or off-white. Any blinds, curtains, or shades that deviated from this requirement were subject to fines. One neighbor had been cited for having patterned curtains that could be seen from their front window. The most bizarre moment came when the HOA sent a notice about patio furniture. The Millers had placed a simple wooden chair near the front window of their living room. From the outside, it was visible through the glass. According to the HOA, this constituted unapproved visible furniture. They were ordered to rearrange their living room so that no furniture could be seen from the street. It felt like a parody, but it was real. The HOA was controlling their home, their yard, their decorations, their pets, even their furniture. Every new rule chipped away at the sense of freedom they had once imagined, and then, as if the constant restrictions weren't enough, they began to meet people who had lived through true HOA nightmares. The Millers were shocked, but their story was only one of many. Around the neighborhood, people whispered about battles that had turned far worse. One family had been fined thousands of dollars because their lawn did not meet the approved shade of green. When drought conditions forced them to conserve water, their grass turned brown. Instead of understanding, the HOA set violation after violation until the family faced legal threats. Another homeowner had been sued for flying a small American flag on a pole in their yard. The board argued that the flagpole was unapproved and demanded its removal. The case dragged into court, draining the homeowner financially and emotionally. There were stories of retirees forced to sell their homes after endless fines piled up. Young families who moved in with dreams of stability, only to leave broken and bitter. The toll was not just financial but emotional, with people describing constant anxiety, fear of being watched, and a sense of living under surveillance. David and Sarah felt trapped. Every day, they worried about receiving another letter in the mailbox. What violation would come next? A flower? A curtain? A simple mistake with trash pickup? The dream of homeownership now felt like living in someone else's house, under someone else's rules, but they weren't alone. Across the country, homeowners were beginning to fight back. Some organized within their communities, campaigning to replace board members with people who valued fairness. Others took their battles to court, challenging unreasonable restrictions and winning victories that set new precedents. Experts began advising potential buyers to always read HOA documents before signing a contract. Buried in the fine print were rules that could shape an entire life. For David and Sarah, that advice had come too late. But they hoped others could learn from their experience. In the end, they realized the most important question wasn't about trash bins, lawns, or decorations. It was about freedom. Where do we draw the line between community standards and personal rights? At what point does order become control? The dream of homeownership should be about freedom, security, and pride. But under the weight of absurd HOA rules, that dream can quickly turn into a nightmare. So the next time you hear about a homeowners association, remember this story. Remember the rules that banned wind chimes, dictated curtain colors, restricted pets, and fined families into despair. And then ask yourself, is it really worth it? This has been the unbelievable truth about HOA rules. Some are minor, some are petty, and some are beyond belief.